welcome back forward to the road, everybody.
Hey everybody, welcome to Four for the Road. This is Road Dirt. We got Chop, we got Drifter, and today we're going to talk about the fantasy land. We're going to talk about what's your dream interview, what is your dream ride, and the motorcycle era. If you could pop into one and be a biker in that era, what would it be? And I'm going to turn it over to Drifter.
So, for those that don't know, we've had one hell of a time just getting this thing started today. So, let's see. Fantasyland. I thought this was a whole different podcast when I heard the title. But anyway, so I guess we'll start off with interviews. If I could go back and interview anybody, obviously it'd be my first choice would be somebody like Tex Bryant, who was the main founder of my club back in 1937. Um, but I don't suppose the listeners want to hear all about that. So I guess if I had to pick somebody, I don't know. I'd like to go and interview um, the founders of each of the major clubs. You know, all the big clubs that you hear about today. Just go back in time and interview them at that time. Don't interview them today or right before they died or anything like that. Interview them like in the year that they started that club, just to see what they were thinking, how things were in their lives at that time, why they started that club, that kind of stuff. That's who I would do. How about you, Chop? Where would you go?
Man, I mean that's a damn good point right there because like back then, those guys they were just kind of doing it, just
Yeah,
riding it out and just having a ball with their people and just living life and free and shit. And those interviews would probably be 100 times different if you interviewed them when they founded the clubs versus if you interviewed them, before they passed or 50 years later after being members. Just the difference and how those interviews would be is kind of something to think about. But if I could interview anybody, there's a few that I would want to interview, but I think like Art would probably be the number one. um, White boy Art, chosen few, just because like without him you wouldn't have any of the interracial clubs that we have today. You know what I mean?
ooh,
Just
that's a bold statement, Chop. That's a
well,
bold
okay.
statement.
I'm going to stand by my statement, but
Okay.
I will I don't think they probably still would have came about eventually, but from my understanding, you're the history buff, so you're going to know better than I do.
No,
But
actually,
from
I
my
agree with you.
understanding,
I agree with you, but that's a bold statement.
just because like whether or not, I mean, you could say history could have turned out 100 different ways outside of the MC world. If things were different, they still would have remained the same. Just somebody else would have done it, but he's the one that did it. You know what I mean? So with the culture that we have today, with what we have today, he's the one that put that in motion. You know what I mean? So I'd like to interview him just because, like, I come from an interracial club, and without him, we wouldn't have had that. So just like what they all went through, the people that surrounded him back then, you know what I mean, and the challenges that he faced, the challenges that his people faced, just and how it evolved. I'd want to do multiple interviews with him. One at the very beginning, and one 20 years later, another one before he passed. I'd want to do them all. But like I said, like he made a big impact, and I don't think he's as well known as a lot of your big club founders are. You know what I mean? So that's who I'd like to talk to, and I'm kind of jealous because a few of the guys in the Four for the Road have gotten to do that. You know what I mean? They've shared beers with him and shared miles with him. So I'm a little jealous of that. But hey, maybe I can sit down with them one day and
Yeah,
kind of
Dave
get a
interviewed
feel
him.
for. Oh
I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
So I mean, it's. Oh yeah, they did do that. Yeah, I forgot about that. But I didn't get to do
Yep.
it. I want to do it.
That's funny. We recently reposted the White Boy Art interview. It was posted up, and how jealous I was being a member of that club, and being a white boy and a member of that club, and never met him because by the time I joined the club, he had passed. And that's was is beautiful that someone was able to sit down and interview him for the chat. But I was like, wow, I got guys in here in the chat that have talked to the man and interviewed him, and I never even met him, and I'm in the club. So that is a cool that is a cool one. White boy art, I think, especially the white boys, and that when we say white boys that tend to be in a club that's interracial, a biracial club, mixed club, whatever you want to call it, right, mixed race. White boy art is definitely an icon for sure for us, and that's a good one, a good topic for me. I guess that you can go a couple ways with it. I always think I'd like for the club I'm in now. Obviously, I think not everyone, but a lot of people probably feel that way. I want to interview, and when I say interview, for me, it would be sit down and talk with, because obviously, if I had to interview them, I'd never get the fucking technology working in time, and they would get mad. They would get mad. They would get mad and leave, and then I'd miss out. But I just want to sit and talk to them. The thing that drives me crazy, Drifter, is I spent over a decade of my military career, or over a decade of my time working within the military, like with technology on the battlefield, like not normal technology too. I was making sure it worked. I had to make sure everything was in place, troubleshoot it, take it out, make it work. Whole missions were put in place to go out and put that technology on the battlefield. And I could pull it off and make it happen. And now you give me $2 worth of fucking StreamYard and I can't make it happen. And everybody on the damn Fourth of the Road is convinced I'm stupid as fuck. And it just drives me fucking nuts.
No, it's just
Maybe that's just part of getting older. Maybe when you get older, it's just like, you just automatically become bad at technology. I don't know. But either way, that's just frustrating. But back on track. I would love to sit with the father, Lionel Ricks, and find out the exact same reason you said, Drifter, is what did you really think when you were starting this club? What did you want? What was your dreams? What were your goals? Because you can hear the stories of people that knew him, but unless you're hearing it from the horse's mouth, you don't know. And I would just like to hear that. But that being said, since I can't steal your answer, and I'm going off track, I'm breaking the rules. I don't. This guy was never in the MC, but there's a guy named Ted Simon. Are you familiar with who he is, Drifter? He's that old guy, the Brit. He's ridden around, circumnavigated the globe twice on a motorcycle.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, man, he did it. So he wrote a book called Jupiter's Travels, and this dude must have had balls the size of fucking coconuts, because he got on I'm trying to think, it was a 500cc motorcycle. It was a Triumph Tiger, and he got on that fucking bike, and he started like in North Africa or something, and I might even dig the map up and stick it on here when we edit this. But this cat circumnavigated the globe. He went to like 126,000 kilometers in 45 countries, and he did it from 1973 to 1977. You think about all the cultures he crossed, all the language barriers he crossed, everything he did, and the courage he had. He worked on his own shit most of the time. Rebuilt the engine while he was out there.
You'd have to.
Yeah, and it was fascinating. And you think this is in the 70s, before roads are where they are now. And I read that book, and it was just a fascinating read. But what was more fascinating than just the fact, what makes a guy like that tick? Because to me, that's the type of guy that like circumnavigates the globe in a wooden ship, or discovers new countries. That's what drives people, that the adventures of the years before. So I'd like just to sit down and find out what made that Joker tick, and what, not only he told in his book about what he did, but I'm like, how do you have the courage to do that? So that would probably be mine.
Fuck that, dude. Fuck that.
I mean, you talking about doing that in the 70s too. I mean, like the lack of technology back then, you break down in the middle of bumfuck Britain somewhere, and you just got to know people. You know what I mean? That like you didn't have we can pull something out of our pockets and reach anybody on the planet now, just about.
Yeah.
Back then, you had to network or get lucky and just run into somebody. You know what I mean? Like that right there took balls just to send it.
That was the height of the Soviet Union, so he wasn't in friendly territory a lot of times.
Yeah, see,
Yeah, and I
that was a brave bastard right there.
So yeah, so that's who I think would be really interesting to have the interview, like we said at the beginning when the guy first started the club, and I'm talking about these big major clubs that everybody knows, and then interview him again towards the later part of his life, or even today if he's still alive, and see how it's different. Like, did he achieve his goals? Did he change his goals? Because let's be honest, even the big 1% clubs were completely different clubs before 1960. You know, there's a major 1% club that you can date it all the way back to the 30s. That is definitely not the same club, not the same people. So it'd be really interesting to hear that difference.
How about this? How about if you could ask them for especially the old clubs that the founders aren't around anymore, and if you could have them sit with you and show them their club, like you said, and say, "What do you think of it now? Is this how do you feel about where the club's at right now?" And to see what they honestly said, that would be, and I'm sure it would be different for every club and every founder. And I think that would be could be said true about any club, right? Not just a 1% club or a large club. I'm sure you could
Yeah.
find somebody who founded a club, that's still three chapters in one state, and it has been for the last 50 years. And it's probably still a totally different club with a totally different mindset than what the founder envisioned.
Oh yeah. I wonder how many of those clubs founders would be disappointed. That would be a tough thing to hear, huh?
Um, I, I would guess, and this is just guessing, that there would be mixed emotions
Yeah.
because they probably wouldn't be too upset that we're out here acting like fucking idiots and running amok because they understood that because that's kind of what the MC culture was all about, right? Being rebellious. So they would probably still giggle at that a little bit about knucklehead stuff. They'd probably be thrilled that they're as big as they have gotten for the ones that have expanded. But I'm sure the ones that got away from road and the fact that everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, the fact that so many have gotten away from riding motorcycles and loving your brother, I think there would be a lot of disappointment across the board.
So I found a guy that was in my club in the early '60s, and I called him out of the clear blue. I just I was doing some research. I had some old documents, and his name was on it. So I just started searching around trying to find anything like a relative or anything, and I found a number that was associated with his old address that was on this document. And out of the clear blue, this happened over the weekend. I just called the guy. I just called that number, and his wife answered, and she was with him when he was in the club, and she was so excited. And he hadn't heard from anybody in the club since 1966 was the last time. Um, he got shipped off to Vietnam, but he was telling me a story about the old guys, and you're talking about shenanigans that used to take place. My club had a bunch of guys that would go out at late at night and race in golf courses and just tear the fuck out of these things, man. So I imagine they'd be pretty happy if they could come back forward and see what we're doing today.
I mean, think of that in the grand scheme of things. What year was that? Ish.
That they were tearing up golf courses was early
Yeah.
50s, early 50s.
Imagine how appalled society was at somebody tearing up a golf course and how just
Oh yeah.
horrible that would be. That's probably like comparable to some of the shit we do now, that's the worst of the worst, that people are like, oh my God, can you believe they did that? I could be wrong, but that's pretty, tearing up a golf course is pretty fucking bad. I mean, let's just be honest. That's fucking
It
horrible.
was. A bunch of dickheads is what they were, but they had fun and they passed it down to us. Oh well. So hey, okay. So what's next after our big the fantasy ride? Where your favorite ride? Where would you like to go? How about you, Road Dirt? Where would you like to go on your perfect ride?
Well, so far I've ridden the lower 48 on one ride. It took a couple weeks, and I've ridden
On one
from,
ride?
yeah, well, I mean, it was one
Fuck.
ride. It was 10,000 miles in 15 days. or 9,000 ish. I always say 10,000, but it's between 9 and 10,000 miles in 15 days. And we just put a route. We did that one for awareness to veteran suicide, but we also did it just because we wanted to ride our motorcycles a lot, right? And it's better to tell your wife, hey, I'm doing this to raise awareness to veteran suicide than, hey, I'm just going to get on my motorcycle and be gone for 2 weeks. Bye. But she supported me. So my next long ride was from Florida, not Florida, from Virginia up through Nebraska into Canada to Alaska to the Arctic Circle and back. So, I've done some amazing long distance rides so far, and I've done some cool short ones and seen some of the best scenery there is to see. But I've found that I'm kind of an endurance rider. I get off on seeing what I can challenge myself, like I'm trying to get on this Hoka coming up and give that a shot. That being said, I think it would be honest. It would be going back with that old cat and riding this, taking 3 or 4 years and just riding around the earth. That would be my dream. That circumnavigating the globe. But I could go with this guy because I'm going to tell you I'm not bold enough to do that. There's no way in fuck I'm getting on a motorcycle by myself and circumnavigating the globe. I'm not built like that. I'm not built to do it alone. But if I had somebody else, because I feed off other people. So if I had a motherfucker that was crazy enough and had the nuts to do it, I would be like, fuck it, I'll do it too. So I would hop on a motorcycle with somebody I trusted and believed in, and I would ride around the fucking earth and be gone for 3 or 4 years. I would do it, and I think I would enjoy it. So that would be my dream ride.
All right, Chop, man. Money's not an object. Bike's not an object. Where you going?
Dude, I still have my dream of like building a hardtail and riding coast to coast, So yeah, and it's because I'm getting older, you know what I mean? Like I'm still the youngest one on staff, but I still like feel like an old bastard. Um, and I don't know if I could take riding coast to coast on a rigid frame, but I want to do it. I want to. I'm upstate South Carolina, so I'd ride down Atlantic coast, throw my feet in the sand, hop back on, and turn tail the other way, and just like bring a tarp on the back with a sleeping bag, and just either pull off under a bridge or a little campground somewhere, and just sleep beside the bike the whole way, and just rough it out, old school. How they would have done back in the 60s and 70s. You know what I mean? Just scraping enough money to have, buy some beer one night in the ride, or maybe scrounge up enough for a cheap motel to get a shower halfway through or something, just some grimy, authentic, old school shit. And that's my dream ride. Now, granted, when I got there, if money's no option, I'm shipping the bike home and I'm flying home. Like I'm not riding both ways. That shit ain't happening. But and one day, I mean, I still plan to do that, even if I'm hating myself by the time I hit Texas, I still want to do it one day, and along the way, especially with technology the way it is today, meet up with people along the way and just catch their stories, you know what I mean? Like other people, whether it be local clubs that are well established in the area, been there for 30 or 40 years, or, big name clubs that have moved in, whatever, just get in touch with the motorcycle culture at every stop. You know what I mean? That'd be all you think, man. You do that. I don't know how long it takes to ride coast to coast, let alone do it on a rigid frame. I'm not doing 10,000 miles in 15 days. I can tell you that. Like, I'm
No.
taking a break. So, I mean, that would take some time, and the stories you could get, by the time you got to California, you'd have a really good idea of how different the culture is in different regions of the country, and also like how it is the same, and one day I want to make that ride. um if I can't, then oh well. But if I can't do it on a rigid frame, oh well. But one day I will do it. I don't care if I got to be like, silent and have some Cadillac on two wheels and make it happen, but one day it will happen. um
I
but
tell
like I
you what,
said,
Chop, if you do it, man, I'll break out my rigid chopper, trick bag, and I'll go at least part of the way with you until we
see,
hit the first big.
about to say, if I got you beside me, then I can't bitch out, because it's like if this old cat can do it, I got to be able to do it. Like that's
Here I am being old.
yeah. Well, look, if you can do it, I can't let you show me up. You know what I mean? I gotta at least send it until I'm crying.
Then
Bring a pillow and shove it under my ass or something.
We can do it. Let's do it. I'm serious. Let's do it.
Look, I'm working on it, man. I got some of the parts from when I was, the chop build a chopper thing, and I'm still trying to find the right. I wanted to get a Sportster and just rigid frame it, but I'm 6'4", so I'd have to rake out a Sportster in order to make it work. So I mean, it's going to be down the line before I can actually make it happen. Probably a few years, especially with the new baby and everything. So it'll be a it'll be a while down the road, but it's a dream I ain't gave up on yet. And don't plan on it. But, if I couldn't do that, then that whole navigating the world sounds absolutely crazy. I don't know if I'd be up for that, man. That's just because you think about the wild ass areas you would go through. You know what I mean? Like, you really want to ride through like some war torn Somalia or some shit. I don't know how public events are nowadays or how things are in the world, but that'd be fucking crazy to think about.
I
My
think I
balls ain't
think I
that
would.
big.
I think I would like you'd have to map around some of those really worst of the worst shitholes, right? Because someone pointed out, I brought this up at work the other day, and someone said it was a different world in 1970 than it is in 2023, where we're at now. So I don't know that. I think there's been shitholes from beginning, and there'll always be shitholes, but you'd have to navigate around them for sure. When I say shitholes, I mean places where like there's war going on, or they would kill you and steal your bike and cannibalize it for parts, before you could even get down the street. How
Think
about
about
Go
hang
ahead.
on. Think about some of that ingenuity you would see like riding through Africa or something, you know what I mean? Because like I see the videos on Facebook and TikTok of these like motherfuckers barefoot squatting in the floor, building crazy shit. Think about the ingenuity you'd see if you broke down out there and they're just robbing parts off of lawnmowers to fix shit or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
they do. They
yeah,
do.
but
I've
like
seen it.
we have access to where we can get online and order whatever parts we want. You know what I mean? Like I'm a fabricator. I could build just about any parts I need. But those guys, they're just kind of like making chicken salad out of chicken shit and making it work. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that would be a hell of an experience on that ride just to see how things get fixed in the least uh the worst situation. You know what I mean? The worst place to break down, how do you fix it? And having those stories, that'd be some fun. That'd be some stories to tell right there. I see why you want to interview that guy now. Like I put a little bit of thought into it before, but now really thinking about it, that'd be a hell of a
Hey,
fucking
Chop and
what's up?
Drifter, have y'all do y'all remember that magazine? It's still around. It was the magazine that's behind the behind what's that damn Backstreet Choppers.
The
So
horse
those
backstreet
guys,
choppers.
yeah, Backstreet the horse, right? And
Yeah.
and they're all about making bikes, making choppers and rigid frames out of
Oh yeah.
like Kawasaki's and Yamahas and whatever else. And they do that rally every year. It's gotten pretty big now.
Yeah. I've been a couple times. It's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a article in one of those magazines. I used to get that magazine regular. A dude rode his shovel head. Is I don't know if it was a hardtail. Probably was a hardtail shovel head, and he rode that crap everywhere. And one of the he rode through Russia, parts of the Russia, like Eastern Europe. He rode through parts of Southwest Asia, and and this is recent. I mean, like in the 2000s, he did it. And he talked about when he was in one of the Russian countries, somewhere in Russia or somewhere in Eastern Europe, his bike broke down because he was using the nav GPS handlebars, and he had a cigarette lighter mounted on his handlebars to plug it into. Well, it shorted out and it found the ground through his clutch cable, so his clutch cable froze up, and it welded his clutch cable into one piece, and or some part of his clutch cable, and so he had to stay overnight waiting to find a part. And the police were like, well, the police station was like, you can go ahead and just park your bike inside and sleep inside. And he's like, well, I don't think so. And they said, no, you don't have a choice, because if you don't, you and your bike won't be here tomorrow.
Fuck.
And that's a real. I'll dig it up later and find that guy and that story and share it with y'all later. But that was kind of like riding a rigid frame, like you're saying, and then circumnavigating the globe. He did quite a bit of riding. And that's a modern dude. So we'll have to look him up and see who this guy is too, because he was pretty phenomenal. I can't remember who he is.
Now that's cojones, man. On a fucking Harley. Just a Harley, even a new Harley going around the world. Just the roads, because once you get outside the cities, road dirt. Once you get outside the cities in third world, man, it's all dirt. If you're lucky, mostly it's mud.
Yeah, a lot of those guys you see doing that shit now are doing it on like enduros
Yeah,
and even still like dude, those are brave motherfuckers, man. Like I don't know how else to put it. Just to be, I mean, think about like especially when you get into some of those places, you're gonna go days where you might just see a village. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And whatever's not on your bike, you don't have it. You know what I mean? That the planning that goes into that and just the absolute sending it, like just courage to just send it and see what happens. But I mean, they've got memories and stories to like sit down, have a beer with anybody that's done that, and you wouldn't have to open your mouth. You know what I mean? They just to let them talk about it would be an evening in itself. I mean, that would be
Yeah.
really cool.
Well, you
That'd
know
be
that guy
awesome.
Ted Simmons talking about Harley versus enduros. That dude I was talking about, Ted Simon. You know, he was born in 31 and he did his first ride in the 70s, which means what? He was like 40, late 30s, early 40s or whatever. He did his first ride. The cat did a second ride in 2001. So he was, how old was he? 2001. 2001. So what's 2000? That's 70, right? So that's 70 years. He was born in 31. In 2000, he redid the journey, but he did it on a BMW R80, which is what? That's like a more of an enduro,
adventure bike
a
is what they
more
call
adventure type bike. But it was a new for that time, 2000, a BMW R80. And he did it in 3 years at 70. So imagine the
it.
difference
Wow.
in the bike. So if you did it in 4 years at 40, because you're stopping and fixing your bike all the time, your bike was a 500cc. Imagine doing it on an 800cc BMW and you're 70, it only takes you 3 years. That says a lot for your point right there, Chop. You're saying, the difference in a bike's ability.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about it, like not only the bikes, the dude's 70 years old. Like I mean, how many 70-year-olds do you see nowadays riding coast to coast, let alone around the world? You know what I mean? And like,
On good roads.
yeah, on good roads, coast to coast. So you mean you go around the world and you're riding through just bumfuck over there, hitting dirt and potholes and mud and everything else, and like I know plenty of capable 70-year-olds that can outwork me from sun up to sundown, all right? But at the end of the day, you're still 70 years old. Like, imagine catching a rock trying to cross a dirt road somewhere over there in the middle of nowhere. You passed your last village 2 days ago and fall and break a hip. Like, you're just you're screwed, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's
And
commitment, man.
yeah, and the cat, I don't know to this date, but from what I looked, I didn't. From when I looked him up and was reading, I didn't see anything that says like born and died. As a few years ago, he was in his 90s and still riding,
That's a bad
which
See,
is
motherfucker.
another right there. That's like my dream, is to be 80 and still getting it on my motorcycle, to be healthy enough. I'm 85 and still getting on my bike and doing what I want to do. Because the worst thing, you see that video of that old man who is crying in tears. He's in a wheelchair and somebody starts a motorcycle for him and he goes up and he rolls the throttle and he's like
Yeah,
crying. That's my worst nightmare, is being in a fucking wheelchair and not being able to enjoy my motorcycle, right?
dude, me
That's
too.
that's that scares me. So I'm like, to be 90 and still riding is fucking, that's like a dream come true to me.
we need to interview that guy. That's what we need to get him on a show. Get his grandkids to teach him how to use this stuff or something. We need to get that guy on a show.
There's some podcasts out there about him, and I'll share it with y'all. And I had written it down in notes, and I can't find it, but there was some podcasts of people talking to him and stuff. So I'll get that information. Let's see, the horse guy and the old guy, and I'll share it with y'all because that's just, I know y'all like to read that kind of stuff and look into it, and I'll share, hell, we'll share it, and I'll probably share it in a post one day, when I'm writing, to say, hey, here's some pretty phenomenal dudes, check them out and look at this stuff. So let's see. So we did our dream interview. We talked about our dream ride.
I got to do mine. Hang on. I got to do my
Oh,
ride.
you did. You haven't even done yours yet. Oh my God, you haven't. We just been talking and talking. I'm sorry, bro. All right, go ahead, man. Let me shut up.
So I'm going to go the complete opposite way. Right? I'm going to start in the southern tip of Spain, ride the Mediterranean all the way down to Rome, not only for the ride and the beautiful views and the scenery, but for the food. So while you guys are broke off trying to find some part, amongst the yak herds or whatever of Outer Mongolia, I'll be sitting in Rome living the life. That's my ride.
That would be. I didn't even think about doing all that. That's pretty. That would be nice right there. Like see, like I like world like history stuff. You know what I mean? So just be able to see like the architecture over there on your way down. You know what I mean? That'd be really. I didn't even think about the food, but I mean having a nice meal on a ride like that, you can't really argue that. We're over here like sending it and doing hardcore shit, and Drifter's like, nah, nah. I'm having a nice
That's
plate and a good drink
Yes,
and
I am.
that's because
enjoying the
Drifter
sunset.
spent like 30 years in a fucking boat in the middle of nowhere, living like a goddamn rat. Fucking people trying to kill him and like wet and cold. And he's already experienced what it's like to the endurance riding. He did it for couple decades in the boats, those small boats in the Navy. So that's probably why he's like all about chilling now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody wants to be a boat guy when the weather's good.
yeah,
Well,
that was a good idea.
that last podcast we did together was it Tom, right? With Tom from Germany, he said he would
Yeah,
do that trip with you if you show. He said he would do it, right?
yeah. I want to do it one day. I don't know if I'd have to get a bike over there or ship mine, but I definitely want to do that ride.
Over there, you can just
What?
do it on a Vespa and just like fucking send it.
Where would you stay when you? But I mean, so you're just going to stay in the nice since money's not an issue. Are you going to stay in the nicest hotels? Or are you going to do road houses? What are you going to do?
I'm gonna find the biker hangouts and ask them. So I want to sleep in clubhouses. I want to sleep at guys, just like Chop was saying. Just go and meet guys in the community on your trip. That's what I want to do on that trip. And there's some amazing groups of people along that route. It'd be very cool.
So are you going to have an interpreter go with you, like from every? You're going to pick up a motor and it's somebody from the on the set that speaks English in whatever language and area you are, and have them ride along with you, or are you just going to tough it out and figure it out, and then when you get there,
Well, believe it or not, the Navy, in their infinite wisdom, sent me to Argentina to learn Spanish, and they sent me to Nice, France to learn French. And I showed them both times that you can't teach me shit, but I know just enough to get fed and slapped in the face. So I'll be okay.
Google Translate, man. Can't go
There you
wrong. You'll
go.
be all right.
hey,
You can
there you
figure it
go.
out.
Here we go. The young guys coming up and being like, "Hey, dummy, they have this stuff called technology now. It's called Google Translate."
Yeah, don't
But
let
think
no shame
about
here about that.
but think about how the dude in the 70s, you know what I mean? When he went cross country, they didn't have that. You know what I mean? Like or when he went across the world. Google Translate wasn't a thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You either knew the language or you just kind of pointed and hoped they understood what you were talking about. I mean, that I can't get over
it's true.
the struggles that was, but I think what we've all kind of gathered is, with each one of our trips is just the along the way riding's only half of the trip. You know what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah,
like meeting up with the people and then just kind of taking in the culture along the way is to me that's probably a bigger part of the trip than the actually ride itself.
I agree.
But that's just me.
Okay, what's next on our list?
Well, we kind of touched on it. So, dream era, a dream era. So, before we go into that, I'm going to throw it. Well, go ahead. Let's let Chop start because I don't think Chop started. Who hadn't started one? Was it Drifter started the thing? Then you kicked it to me. So, Chop, what's your dream era?
Man, if I had to pick an era to be dropped off in, I'm gonna say like the 50s, the mid 50s, when the clubs were just kind of you had a few, you had clubs out there that were kind of getting headway. People were, starting to run with them, but they weren't what they are today. And nothing against clubs of today, they're just not what they were back then. back then there wasn't as I don't think there was as much politics in the club world back then as there is today. There wasn't as much there was more freedom of it. You know what I mean? The is idolization, is that the right word I'm looking for here? Well, the things that we idolize about the club life were really prominent back then, where today you have to find them amongst the stresses of it and the for lack of a better term, the bullshit that comes with being in a club. I mean, that's just you've got internal shit to deal with. You've got the real world and the rest of the people's perception of you to deal with. Back then, it didn't fucking matter. You didn't care what people thought of you. Your point was to just like fuck y'all. We're having fun. We're gonna we're gonna ride our motorcycles and live life and just and do our thing with our people and not really worrying about tomorrow so much as living for like right then with the guy beside you, and doing those rides and sleeping on the side of the road and just the roots of I think that was when the roots of the MC culture we know today started. Now I know in the 60s and 70s there was a curve there where things really changed, and your 1% club started coming up, your politics started coming into play, the the for lack of a better term, the wars amongst nations kind of started and whatnot. And in the 50s, you really didn't have that I know of. It was just riding motorcycles and, being the best brother you could be and trying to be a part of something bigger than yourself and just the
Well, they had their
pureness
problems
of
too.
it. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, there were always, I mean, this life has never been all sunshines, rainbows, and unicorns. I mean, there's always been shit somewhere. But I feel like back then it was more pure, maybe more innocence isn't the right word, but something I need a fucking thesaurus. Um just they were just the life was more pure back then, I feel like. Where today you've got outside things going on, you've got technology, which has both been a good thing and a bad thing for clubs. You've got, let alone how law enforcement looks at a lot of clubs, how society as a whole looks at a lot of clubs, and how, nowadays you kind of have to walk a line with, I don't want to say keep society happy, but you can't really ride around just like fuck y'all all the time either. You know what I mean? You kind of got to have that balance. And back then, I really don't think there was much of a balance. You just kind of did it. And you did it with a smile on your face with the guy right beside you, standing on the seat and just doing dumb shit and just having a ball with it. And that would be my dream time to come in and just to see what it was like. Now, yeah, that's what I would want to do. Because after that, it just kind of everything got real rough after that. And I don't really want to deal with that shit.
So I'm going to ask a question. Do you think, let's in the area you're looking at, do you think would it be safe to say, even if there wasn't as any more tolerance for bullshit? When I say bullshit, I'm talking about guys riding their motorcycles and tearing up golf courses, right? So there was probably no more tolerance back then than there is now. But I would say that the ramifications of acting like a fuckhead in a motorcycle club today are a lot worse and will get you in a lot more trouble and be more life altering than they were in the 50s. Is that an accurate statement, or is that just us trying to fantasize and make shit up?
I mean, I feel like that's an accurate statement. Back then you look at all kind of things from back then, you could, the kids could go down here and do something stupid on, you know, Johnny Tim's farm and nobody went to jail. They drug them home. You know what I mean? Dropped them off on their parents' doorsteps and like let the parents deal with it at home. And I feel like that was kind of the same way back then with that. They're out here tearing up golf courses and shit. The people that own the golf course or the authorities or whatever knew who did it. Just, hey man, can't do that shit. Go fix it. Versus now you've got, whatever. I'm no lawyer or law enforcement officer, but I'm sure that's a fucking slew of charges to go out
Yeah,
there and just
yeah.
tear up a golf course. You know what I mean? And that changes everything. Now And again, this isn't the days back then. You have to have a job to be in a club nowadays. You know what I mean? You can't just be doing, shade tree work, floating around, picking up odd jobs here and there and support this lifestyle, especially if you're in a nation that, you got your mandatories, you got your dues, you've got your fucking bike payments because half of these bikes you can't afford to do these big runs on busted ass 80s, bikes that have been rode hard. You got to have something that can do it. So, like, you got to have jobs, careers to be able to do this stuff nowadays. And back then, I feel like you could kind of get away without it. Plus, back then, people all worked on their own shit. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't in the 50s, if you were in a club, I mean, Drifter, you correct me if I'm wrong. If you were in a club, you couldn't just take your shit to the dealership and have it worked on. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of them didn't want anything to do with you because they saw you as like an outsider. So, like, you
Yes,
had to be able to
yeah,
fix it. Your
yeah.
brothers had to help you fix it. And it gave you a little bit more independence of it. But, like you said, doing the dumb shit and the hooligan shit and just, raising hell, racing down Main Street and tearing up golf courses and just, partying too much, drinking too much, being too loud didn't have life altering consequences that it has today.
That's it right there. Because if you tore up a golf, just like you said, I agree with you 100%. If you tore up a golf club, a golf course, in the middle of the night and you got caught, the cop would probably bean you in the head a couple times with a nightstick. You might spend the night in jail. You'll get some kind of fine, maybe. But today, you do that, you're going to jail and it's going to be a federal offense, and that's going to fuck you up for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and see that's the whole but see, part of that too, I think not only just because society has changed, but look at how the past everybody knows the MC culture's history has its dark moments, you know what I mean? And nobody in today's, especially in the clubs that were part of those darker moments, I don't think anybody's proud of them. You know what I mean? And this is just me as an outsider, nobody looking in. I wasn't there and I'm not part of any of those clubs that have had those bad days, but I don't think anybody's proud of them. The ramifications of it that it's had on their clubs and the lives of members and whatnot. But that kind of I think that had an impact too on the ramifications of doing dumb shit nowadays, because anybody's looking for any reason they can to make guys in colors look bad. So if you go out here and you're just having a good time and getting a little bar fight, you know what I mean? Like think about how common bar fights used to be. You get in a bar fight nowadays, you got to worry about what's going to happen to the club, because of all they're looking for anything they can to get onto you for. Where back then they just saw it as like, oh, those are just the hoodlums. Like they'll sober up in the morning, they'll be all right. But I think that's kind of our own fault a little bit. But society in itself has changed too. Yeah, I could ramble about that for days. I can ramble about that for days. What area you want to get dropped in, Road Dirt?
I think I would say for me, I'm thinking the early to mid 60s. Um, Once again, it's probably romanticism. Everything, grass is always greener and everything looks better. But I just recently read a book. It was called Hangman. And this is nothing, this just happens to be what club the guy was with, nothing to do with me. But it was Hangman riding with an outlaw motorcycle club in the old days. And it was this cat called Dale Aronson. And he just wrote a book about what it was like. He started coming around that club in the 60s, I want to say. Like, what I'm trying to remember the history of that club, but real soon after they started, like in the late 50s or early 60s, and he was like not even old enough to join, like a teenager. So he told things from his perspective about just being around the club, not being a member, and then becoming a member. But a lot of times during his early membership, he was like a 19-year-old kid who all he wanted to do was ride his motorcycle and bang chicks, and that's all he had to do. He didn't have a house. He didn't have responsibilities. He had an old chopper he built or bought. However, I can't remember how exactly it came across, but back then everybody had the, suicide shift, foot clutch, hand shift. It's crazy. No front brake type crap, and and that's what they rode everywhere. And he talks about riding those bikes, and he rode his like 3, 4, and 5 state long trips, and he would sleep on the ground and people would just at times he would meet people. A guy, he was sleeping next to an oil derrick at a fence, and some guy come pulling up. He thought he was going to tell him to beat it. The sun was coming up, and he said, "Hey, I saw you out here last night when I was doing my rounds on security checks. You had coffee yet?" And he's like, "Nope." He's like, "Have some coffee." And then he's like, and then he slept a little later. Another guy come by, said, "Hey, my buddy told me to come up here and check on you. You want some of my sandwich?" And he shared his sandwich with him, and that's how that dude lived. He didn't have money half the time, and they weren't angels. They had stolen credit cards they would use to get gas, and they would get stolen credit cards, and they'd hold on to them for emergencies, and they'd tuck them away, and they would try and hustle and scrape up and do odd jobs and get money the way they could, whatever they could do to get money. And when times were at their worst, they would use their stolen credit card a couple times, because back then they had the thing that you put the credit card in and go or that, or just right. And that, so
How
there
did
was no
how did it go?
like this. So, but he just talks about that. He also talks about some of the, about a couple times guns were pulled. They fought a lot, knife fights or fist fights, some knife fights, and he talked a couple times about guns coming out. But overall, he just, most of his book was about riding his motorcycle from this state to that state, sleeping on somebody's couch here, sleeping in a clubhouse there, hooking up with a girl, living with a girl and her parents for a summer, and working an apple orchard, kind of like, but once again, he was a 19-year-old kid who had no responsibilities, no bills. By the time I was that age, I'd probably already deployed to some other country at least once. So I was in the army for 20 years, so I didn't really get that. I had like one summer of really being just like no roles, no responsibilities, no nothing, living like that, and I loved it. Next thing I know, I was in the army, and by the time I was almost 40, I was indoctrinated, and I was a responsible young adult or responsible old man. So I guess I would go back to the 60s, ride my chopper around, be 19, not have a care in the damn world, 19 to 25, just riding the roads and getting and doing what he did. And, and come later on in life, he ended up being like he got his pilot's license, and he flew. He was what's the word? Not federal. He was a commercial pilot. He flew for, like, I don't know, airlines. So he finally realized he had to grow up too, right? But he spent his youth in the early '60s, '70s, whatever, and he got pretty hairy for him at times. But that would be what I would drop into. Just reading that book, I think that would be a nice time. But I wouldn't want to do it now at this age. I'd want to go back to me being a 20-year-old service
Of
member
course.
in another
Yeah.
country. But I'd rather just be a 20-year-old on a chopper on the West Coast, just riding to Oregon, from California to Oregon or whatever. That would be mine.
I guess so. So for me, I thought about this a little bit. Whenever I first came into motorcycles and club life, the guys from the late '60s and '70s were just hitting their middle age, so they were starting to slow down. But it was still there. All the stores were there, and I could see it. I thought about going back to that, but in reality, they had a hard life, man. They they had long hair when long hair wasn't cool. Those are the guys that we hear the stories about, not being able to get a hotel room, not being able to go in that diner, they get kicked out. The cops would follow them. And, this is before, cell phones, so you could take videos and stuff, but the cops would show up and say, "We're taking you to the county line and you got nothing to say about it. And oh, by the way, here's a couple knocks in your head just to let you know we're serious." So I thought about that. I thought, the bikes were very cool, but nah. So I think, like Chop was saying, the '50s had a sort of a romanticized thing about them. Now they had their problems too, but right after World War II, 1945, 46, they had one thing that no other era really had, and that was huge amounts of surplus motorcycles from the army. You could pick those things up super cheap. They would have auctions where guys would buy them by dozens, and they were just everywhere. So if I could go back to like 1946, be a young guy in Southern California, I would pick up one of those bikes and just same thing, just start hitting all these early clubs, going to their clubhouses, hanging out, doing what they do. I think I'd do that. That's if I could go back, that's where I'd go.
Man, y'all got me second guessing my decisions, man. I might want to come back to the 50s with y'all. Sounds like a lot more fun, man. I might see if I could zip back, time travel back a little further, and all three of us can go back there.
I
I
agree
mean, you
with Chop.
look at you look at any of the eras, man. They all had their highlights. You know what I mean? You could find a good thing to drop about in any era. You know,
Oh
with
yeah,
the 40s with the surplus motorcycles, the 50s of the romanticization. I don't know. I'm not a very educated guy. Y'all know what
yes
word I'm
you
looking
are.
for.
We
Um,
do, and you are educated.
the pureness of the 50s and the culture that, and even though they had problems, they weren't the problems you have today. The 60s and the 70s with the custom modifications coming in, people starting to really build choppers, and the whole easy rider era, you know what I mean? And you roll into the 80s where the your big clubs kind of started to really turn into the big clubs that they are today, and then
Yeah.
I think the only one nobody would really want to drop into is like the late 80s to the 90s. I don't know if that's an area anybody really wants to be in, but you
And
can
you could take it
find.
further back. You could take it further back to the 20s and 30s, even the 1910s. They all had their advantages and disadvantages. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you talk about 1920 and pre 1920. Your bike didn't do shit. Okay, instead of you had a real belt drive. It was a leather belt. Okay, that kind of shit. But you dressed really well. Those guys wore their caps and their suit and ties, and that's how they were very dapper. And in the 1930s, nobody had any freaking money, but they still had a good time. So plus and
Drifter,
minuses.
Drifter. When did we start? When did they start consider or thinking of bikers as hoodlums? What year did that start? What time frame?
Oh, from day one, because you had these big noisy bikes that would go up and down going 20 miles an hour in the city limits and scaring all the horses, and it's those damn bikers. It started at the very beginning. It never has changed. That's true. There you
So
can read
so
newspaper accounts.
So regardless, when we go back, we'd be able to fly our freak flag, right? We'd be able to be like, "Fuck you
Yeah,
guys, aha!" So no matter
yeah,
what, when you go back, you're still a biker, right? You're still like, "Fuck
yeah,
you," blah blah blah. Okay, cool.
absolutely. And we're joking, but that's very true. I think motorcycles attract a certain kind of guy,
Well, I
and that
mean,
certain kind of guy is us.
yeah, you can't really. Nowadays, you've got your 9 to 5 lawyers and your calm guys riding motorcycles, but your people that actually put themselves in the culture and not just ride in their suit to work and then ride home, that actually live the life of it. Not even just a club life, just live the MC culture life. That is a specific type of hoodlum. I mean, I don't know of a better way to put it. We all got a little wild hair in us, and it is what it is. But I got to thinking too, and you're talking about the guys back then with the leather belt drives doing 20 miles an hour. Imagine if you were to put one of those guys on the baggers of today, let alone your performance bikes of today, just how mind blown they would be at the technology and how far we've came. We talked about the interviews with the club founders and how the clubs had changed, but just all that shit comes back to the motorcycle is the heart of all of it. Everything branches
Oh
off
yeah,
from the love of motorcycles. So you take those guys, take those same club founders and put them on these performance baggers of today. You know what I mean? And just how amazed everybody would be at how far we've came.
Imagine how many golf courses you could fuck up in one night.
For real, like that. But for real, I mean, like the just the technology of it is everything with the bikes and whatnot. And I didn't even think about the early motorcycle days, like you said, the tens, 20s, 30s, when it was really just kicking off. Motorcycles just came around. But I think it really there was like in the 60s and 70s, you had that hard turn with the club life where everything kind of started to become what it is today. After World War II, that's when you really got that hard, that really big influx of bikers, coming home, and all the surplus motorcycles, and it was just kind of like the perfect storm to create
It was.
the kind of guys that we have today. You know what I mean? Right out here doing dumb shit. Color or no colors, you know what I mean? Club or no club. There's always guys out there doing dumb shit on motorcycles, man. It's like you've done it, I've done it, Road Dirt's done it, we've all done it, and we're gonna continue to do it. That's most of us work normal jobs and have families and have to kind of tame ourselves some for parts of our lives. But once you throw your leg over that bike, you catch that open road, nobody's around, you know what I mean? You can let your inner hoodlum out a little bit and live a little, and
I
Yeah,
know what you're
well,
talking
that's all
I
about.
that.
figured I figured that out early on though. See, I didn't get you said get out of your area or kind of get away from people. So I had my first street bike when I was about 15, and my cousin was he was wrote a bad check. It was he went out of his league. He got on his motorcycle, left Fort Benning, Georgia, and went way out of his radius into North Carolina for his leave. He come to visit and hang out with me and my dad for a weekend, and he wasn't supposed to go that far. He wasn't on pass, and he got on. It was a Yamaha Seika 550, and he got on it and started to head home, and got a flat tire. Didn't have any money, so he wrote a bad check to get a bus ticket to get him back to Benning so he wouldn't get in trouble. And he called and said, "Hey, if you want to buy that bike, I'll sell it to you for like $500. You go pick it up." So that was my first motorcycle. So I went and got it and put a tire on it. And I hadn't been riding for shit a week. And I rode down and it had real loud pipes on it. It wasn't fast. It was a horrible 550. It wasn't. They were not fast, but it was really loud, noisy, and Yamaha. And I rode down like we lived in a like an area. It was like a cul-de-sac. You rode in from the road. It was a dead end, but there's multiple cul-de-sacs. So I left one into that road and must have went like whatever. It was like a 5-speed, I guess. I could think looking back. I went from first to fifth, like I mean, just as loud and fast as I could. I didn't know my dad was home, and then I whipped into the cul-de-sac and come down. And I started. I got down to about second gear, and I whipped it back through the gears, and I downshifted coming down the cul-de-sac, sliding in the yard sideways, and parked it. Got off. My dad was standing there waiting on me, and he was like, "Oh," and he was a hell raiser. I always tell people he did drugs, he drank a lot, he'd been in prison, but he didn't want me to be in a motorcycle club. And when I did bad shit, that was just not acceptable, right? I sit there and watch him do fucked up shit all the time, but then I guess I was held to a higher standard. And he's like, "Jesus Christ, you're out here riding this fucking motorcycle illegal. You've got no tags, no fucking driver's license, and you're riding up and bringing attention to the whole fucking neighborhood to you, dumbass. If you want to do that shit, go to fucking Bell's Island." That was like a big long road. Go out there and ride like that. And besides that, you ain't, just cussed me up one side and down the other. And so yeah, anyway, that was just a good story. So you said acting like an asshole without colors. You're right. I hadn't even been on a motorcycle for 3 weeks and I was already doing it.
See, it draws a certain kind of guy.
There's something about it, man. It's like you get on it, and it's just like, oh, I can do this. Just twist my wrist, and it makes cool sounds. Oh, I'm going fast. You're doing like 50 miles an hour, but you know it
Yeah,
brings it out, man. It's you can't help it. And then you've got some guys that get on a bike and they're just like, nope, fuck this. This is not for me. But once you get on it, and if it's for you, you find out really quick. It lights a fire, and it's just you may have thought you were a calm person, but when you got all that power sitting between you, you got an open road in front of you and nobody around, you
yep.
can't help but do dumb shit. I mean, it's just, but
We've
that
all
dumb
done it.
shit's but that gives you the cool stories to tell, like that right there. You know what I mean? Just the dumb shit leads to the best stories, man. And I don't know how else to put that. You can't be old and wise if you were never young and dumb. So I'm gonna be pretty fucking smart in my old age.
Well, right on.
Well, man, I'll tell you what, we're creeping up on an hour, believe it or not. It took me almost an hour to get the technology working, and once we got it working, time just flew by. We're at like 58 minutes and
And
48 seconds.
don't let No Shame know that. He's going to make more TikTok videos about it.
Yeah, I don't care, man. Well, when you guys were just watching, this is all on me. This is me, man. So whatever. I don't care. I'll be the old dumb guy they make fun of. It makes them feel. It makes them feel really good about themselves when they can make fun of the old guy over here. So.
Yeah, asshole.
Well, that's it, man. Anybody got any parting words or anything to say on the way out?
No, it's just thank you guys for listening to us. So we just sit around, and it's like we've been riding all day, and we're sitting around a campfire. And some people seem to like that. So keep coming back. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll keep
right
doing
on.
it as long as y'all keep listening. Actually, we're
All
going
right.
to do it whether you listen or not.
That's
So-
true.
No, I was going to say, yeah, we have 3 listeners right now. If it goes down to 1, I'm still going to do it, and then I'll just go listen myself, so it'll go back to 3. All right,
yeah.
with that, I'm going to end this thing.